This website is devoted to the proposition that DNA, in natural undisturbed settings, for example, the living cell nucleus, does not have the Watson-Crick double-helix structure. The true structure is somewhat similar, but is a totally untwisted, non-helical structure which you've probably heard nothing about. It is my firm opinion that the non-helicity of natural DNA has been very well established, both by molecular modeling and by laboratory experimentation, and that the obstinate refusal of the molecular biological establishment to recognize this is rooted in multiple bad reasons. These include, but are not limited to: 1. Stubborn refusal of scientists to admit error, a stubbornness which only increases with each passing year that the error stands, and which has now grown into the academic equivalent of a ponderous stone wall. 2. A refusal to acknowledge anything that might interfere with the established flow of grant money, and 3. The inability of today's scientists to take an interest in anything that can quickly be turned into a publicly traded corporate biotech gold mine or an ineffectual but lucrative cancer cure. How could over 60 years of scientific publications on the double helix all be wrong? They aren't. What's wrong is simply that the DNA, used for essentially all published structural studies to date, was seriously altered by human hands before it was ever looked at. Consider this. Studies on the structure of DNA are invariably done on DNA which has been highly purified. This is good, no? Not necessarily. In the cell, DNA, which is negatively charged, is invariably complexed with positively charged proteins. These charges are powerful and extend the full length of the chromosome. Yet the possibility that these charge interactions may alter the structure of the DNA seems to have eluded our helix-loving molecular biological establishment. Furthermore, when used for structural studies such as X-ray crystallography, DNA suffers from 3 other potentially fatal flaws. 1. The DNA is generally sheared into hundreds or thousands of fragments, destroying any structural aspect which relies on chromosome integrity. 2. The DNA is often nicked and resealed with various enzymes, which means that the structural studies have been done on man-made topological laboratory artifacts. 3. The DNA, for crystallography, must be dehydrated, so that any structural aspect dependent upon hydration is destroyed. So the Watson-Crick structure is really only well established for purified DNA fragments in the laboratory. How can we know that the structure of DNA in the intact cell nucleus is the same? We cannot. The crux of the matter. In the final analysis, the matter rests upon one single observation. The 2 circular single strands which together constitute a chromosome do not readily separate, suggesting that they are plectonemically wound, i.e. that they have the Watson-Crick double-helix structure where the 2 strands are permanently locked together by a helical twist, as much so as the links of a metal chain are permanently locked together. In DNA, such a linkage could only be overcome by breaking open at least one of the strands and unwinding it. Notice I didn't say that the strands do not separate. I merely said that the strands do not readily separate. The strands have, in fact, been experimentally separated, proving that they are not, after all, twisted together. The reference shown above is from this website, from the first of the 5 PowerPoint slideshows you will find here. If you look at nothing else, please at least look at this. If you think the DNA double helix is carved in stone, you're in for a big surprise. Conversely, if native DNA really had the Watson-Crick twisted structure, then rejoining the separated strands would produce an abnormal object, because that object would have no net helical twist. Yet it is known that the physical properties of the product of such rejoining are entirely normal, proving again that native DNA has no helical twist. Worthlessness of key studies purporting to prove that DNA is helical. Most people naively imagine that the existence of the Watson-Crick structure in naturally occurring unmolested DNA is proven by published studies so vast in number as to constitute a veritable mountain of evidence. In actual fact, the number of such studies is 2. That's all. Only 2. It's not a mountain. It's a molehill. These are the studies, Stettler et al. And Crick et al., both 1979 papers. The first of these may be well described as a combination of inexcusable error and deliberate deception. The second may be well described as a case of smoke and mirrors, which endeavor to give the appearance of addressing the structure of native DNA, but which in fact only discussed the structure of man-made laboratory artifacts resulting from topoisomerase treatment. You can look high and low in the molecular biological literature, but you will not find any other important structural studies on native DNA except these, because all the others were done on DNA that had been nicked, cleaved, or otherwise disrupted before the study was ever done. These studies were so laden with error, and, in at least one case, with deception bordering on fraud, as to render them worthless as science. If you are one of the many people whose fundamental concept of DNA structure rests upon these studies, I warn you that you are standing perilously upon intellectual thin ice. Because of the crippling effect these 2 tiny articles have had on the human thought process, essentially barring all progress in our understanding of DNA structure, I have reviewed them both on this website in great detail. Look up the slide references above and see for yourself. The studies that have led scientists astray for over a half-century are all studies on laboratory DNA artifacts. The conclusion, and my message to you, is this. You cannot directly study the structure of DNA in its natural setting except by the single tool of human logic. Human logic is the tool that gave rise to this website. There are 15 hours of PowerPoint presentations here, over 1,000 slides in all. No one, not even me, the author, could stand to sit through all of them at once, so watch whatever small part you can stand to watch. If perchance you return to watch the rest, you will then know more about DNA structure than all the chairpeople of all the Ivy League university departments of molecular biology, not to mention the chairpeople at Caltech, Stanford, Oxford, and Cambridge. These have all foolishly allowed themselves to be chained to the double-helix structure for DNA. And though you may think them to be the sprightly hare, and yourself the slow tortoise, yea, though you proceed slowly and steadily, you will in the end win the race.